Should I stop presenting?
No. You can keep that presentation. No issues at all.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So, yeah. Good afternoon to all of you once again, and welcome you to this fourth day of the FDP. We had a very productive day yesterday. We went into the details of design inquiry models. We have continued the session on the five-stage process of the design thinking model, and then he has also mentioned about the second part of the managing design process. We've also covered how the emotional intelligence is integrated with the design thinking, and that is where we have left. And today you have very exciting sessions. One is on the managing design activities by Mr. Sayantan, and then I will take the session on how do we acquire design capability and aim at preparing our organizations to be design capable for future ready. So on that note, I'll hand over the session to Mr. Sayantan Mukherjee. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Rao. This is really helpful. People, I mean, everybody over here, they get a glimpse back of what we have touched upon yesterday. And if you all remember that we were following this five-stage process, we have completed problem identification, then we moved on to ideation as well yesterday. We completed these two aspects yesterday. And today we will be touching upon how you go about validating the ideas that you have. So I'll just run a quick recap from your end. Help me out on that. We'll just, once I bring that slide up, we'll just have a quick run through on it. So since this is a quick recap, just can anybody help me out that there are two things. There are two sessions that we did yesterday. The first session, we did the rest three parts of the six-step framework of problem identification, if you remember. Can anybody of you help? I mean, I know that you already have done your assignments you sent us, so we could see that you have already remembered, but still, it will be good for others also here. What are the three steps that we did yesterday on completing our problem identification? Anyone? Day before we ended in interaction matrix. So then where did we move? What was the first thing that we did? We made deep dive. Yes?
Deep dive.
Yes, before deep dive, we did one thing called function modeling. We said that it's a pictorial representation of the interaction matrix.
Correct.
Yes. Then we did deep dive, absolutely, which is nothing but a multi-Y analysis. We did that, and then we moved to the last part, which was formulating one problem statement. We said that it is the how might be problem statement, if you remember. And before we ended the first session, we did look at a structured ideation process, how it looks like. If you remember, we had looked into the idea funnel, how ideas go in, how the divergent thinking happens, then how we move to the convergent thinking phase. We didn't go into the details of it in that session. We said that we will be doing it in the next session, which is in the next session. Before we ended the day, we had one session where we were actually discussing upon ideation in details. And there what we did is we had so many ideas through our divergent thinking process. So we started off with a free flow of ideation. Then we introduced a process called create, which was nothing but an acronym of 6 different words. And we said that we will be using these words to use as triggers for our ideas. And using those ideas, all of you together gave us many ideas about how we can make some kind of online learning process more engaging for the students, for the learners. So we did that, and post that we did something called the convergent thinking process, or the idea ranking process. There we mainly looked at the different aspects. People looked like we talked about customer desirability, we talked about technical feasibility and economic viability and environmental sustainability as well. Then post that, we actually looked into that in case these are not the factors that you are looking at, you can look at factors that you create yourself. So if you remember, I gave you an example of a technical example of rotavator, which is an agriculture implement or a machinery, you may say. And we looked at that, how we used some technical aspects to decide which idea we should be prioritizing. But if you remember, we also mentioned that throughout that process also, we keep back and look at our empathy map that we generate at the first stage of design thinking. We look at it, we always validate whether whatever we are thinking is something that the customer has already spoken about, whether they are happy about it, because that goes into our user desirability score. And if we don't have the data with us, we note it down. We note it down that this is something that we assume customer may be liking. We need to validate whether customer is going to like or not. So this is in short the two sessions that we had on the flow of the 5 design thinking stages. Now we are moving on to the very last stage where we are going to prototype and validate. Mainly we are doing validation. So these two combined together is the validation process. Now, so where did we end? We ended with our top ideas, right? One top idea finally we chose. If you remember, for us, for the blade configuration that I showed, there was one single blade option that we chose. That's where we end. Okay. Now, this is where we see that we have to move into hypothesize. What is hypothesize? You have to create. What is hypothesis? Mostly, if all of us understand hypothesis, we understand that hypothesis is a statement which has not yet been proven. Right? We don't have a solid proof that backs it up. Once we get that there is a proof of it, it becomes a principle. So when I look at hypothesis, what I am trying to do essentially is I'm looking at my idea and I'm trying to identify that what hypothesis have I already drawn in my mind. We sometimes call this as bias also. Okay, sometimes we have biases in our mind. So what bias we have, what assumptions we have made, that's what we try to understand. And how do we do that? We do that by number 1, noting down the top idea. Obviously, that's something that we have done at the end of our last stage, and then becoming our devil's advocate. Now, here this is going to be this is very important for all of us to understand that majority of this, when we discuss majority of our activity that we do in design thinking, has to be a group activity. Why so? Because most of the time what happens is, if you are the lone person who is working on it, when you come up with an idea, it's a human tendency to fall in love with that idea. Okay, because it's our brainchild. So obviously we are very much we feel bad when we criticize that, or rather we cannot criticize that, right? In a group, what happens? Mostly an idea is not solely yours. It's a made up idea. Like you had a part of it, then somebody built upon it, and it all happens together. So one idea is not product of one individual. It's product of multiple individuals. And then it becomes pretty easy for you to find out faults in it, because it's no more, you are not anymore emotionally attached to it. Okay. And that's what devil's advocate's role is. So a devil's advocate is something who will look at your idea and criticize it as much as possible. Not nonsense criticism, but productive criticism. Like say, when you look at an assumption. So for example, we came up with a lot of ideas yesterday, and one of the ideas that was there is, if we convert the whole experience of online learning into something similar to how gaming happens, then is it good? Like that we assumed that that's going to be good. People are going to like it. Now, when you look back into your empathy details of the students for whom you're designing this, maybe you have not noted anything where they mentioned that anything converted into a gaming way is something that people like me will be liking. You don't have it with you. So then what do? you know that you are believing that because these are students, they are anyways into gaming and all this stuff, they will be enjoying this. That's why you want to create this, but you are not sure whether it is true or not. So when you become a devil's advocate, you will look at it and say, are you really sure that students are going to like this? If this is just becoming another gaming type of education becomes a gaming way of representation, are you sure they're going to like it? A devil's advocate will speak this way. At the moment you don't have an answer to it, your empathy map doesn't have an answer, or any other data, your not only your primary research but secondary research also, if you don't have, you note it down and say, no, actually this is an assumption that I have made, and all assumptions has to be validated. So you know that I have to run an experiment to prove this thing out. Okay, so this is something that as a devil's advocate you do. And it's not only one assumption, you can have multiple assumptions, and for all the assumptions we have to go ahead and do some experiments. So sometimes what happens, I'll show you with an example. Yeah, this is the same chart that I showed you yesterday. This is for the configuration of the blade, right? Now, what happens is when we were creating this, we were down into this conundrum that which one of these two, the dual blade or the single blade, which one of these two should we be going ahead with? Now, at that point of time, since they were scoring the same, we had to look into our details of whether we do have a feedback which says that yes, people don't care much about the blade life, which we actually didn't find much, you know. So when we looked into this blade life stuff, though yesterday, if you remember, I said that finally we realized that they don't really care much of the blade life. That happened because we actually went back and did the experiment and understood from them whether they really find it important or not. But what we were sure about was this. This is something that we got in our empathy map already, because multiple people, multiple farmers, they were complaining, not complaining, they were actually, when say for example, if we were talking to them about how good a John Deere tractor is to compare to how good a Mahindra tractor is, or there are other local brands also. There is something called Vishal, something called Qatar and all. So when we talk about all this, the factors that they were coming up with, one of the factors that they were coming up with is how much diesel is getting burnt out to use the tractor on the field. So we realized that they are very much concerned about diesel burning, fuel burning. So because that's directly goes into their pocket, they can see their pocket getting burned. So that was one of the empathy, in the empathy map we had it pointed out. So we could easily say that this is one of the biggest thing. We cannot make it the weight, we cannot increase the weight at all, because if it does, then the diesel usage will be more. But what we were not sure about is the blade life concept. So we just kept it as a point that we assumed that they may be, actually we had a different assumption. We assumed that if the blade life goes down, they won't like it. So what happened later on is we validated that our assumption was wrong. So we were stuck at that point, and then there was a discussion happened that, okay, fine, how do we conduct this experiment? What all we need to do? So we planned that. We went out in the field. Almost it took some 7-8 days, but within 7-8 days we came back and said, yes, now we are confirmed this is not a big concern for them, so we could take the decision and go ahead. Okay, so this is generally how you take assumptions, you understand assumptions, and then you go ahead and validate it. I'll talk about how you design experiments and all, but one of the most common thing that you may think is because I was talking to some teachers who also face this online problem, like people don't speak online. And one thing that that individual told me is, I am thinking of proposing and telling them upfront, telling the students upfront that, class participation has score. So if you are participating in the class, then only I'll be giving you the score. So I will motivate them in that way. Now, what I asked him, that are you pretty much sure that your audience is going to be that much motivated for this course? Because what he told me is he is not allowed to score more than 10 marks for class participation. there was some rule in his institute, he cannot score more than 10 marks. So was 10 marks good enough for a student to come out of the shell that they are in right now and participate? So we didn't know that. So I told him that, see, this is one assumption that you are making, and you have to confirm whether that assumption is true or not. And finally, I am not sure whether his assumption is yet true or not. But these are the kind of things that happens, because most of the time we have biases. Like he also had that bias, that student definitely one score. So was it true? Was it not true? That's something that has to be validated. So till now, whatever we spoke, any questions basis that? Everybody got this clear, right? That how you need to identify your assumptions. You just note down all the assumptions by becoming the devil's advocate. Note all this. Next, what we are going to do is something called that validation. So now, when you are trying to validate your assumptions, you have to first identify which assumption are you going to validate first. So what it means, you have to prioritize all your assumptions. Okay. So assumption prioritization happens by using a methodology called the assumption mapper. Okay. What you are seeing in front right now is a graph which we call the assumption mapper, and there are two factors over it. One, on the left hand side, the vertical axis, it talks about that how important is the hypothesis or the assumption that you have. Is it a make or break assumption? Like, say for example, if you are thinking that you are going to propose that there is a class participation marks, and that's the basis which you believe that you will be having a lot of engagement in your class, then the assumption is very high. I mean, the value importance of that assumption is very high, right? So when you put in this column, you definitely know that you have to put that I assume students get motivated by getting marks has to go up in this vertical axis. Then how easy or difficult is it to test this assumption comes on the horizontal axis, like your x-axis. Okay, it says that is it very difficult to test what you are trying to do? If it is not, then it's closer. It's closer to your the zero. So it's closer to the source. If it is very difficult, like it's not easy to try out, then it goes towards the other end, right? Now, why you do this? Because you have, say, 8-10 assumptions in your idea. Okay, what you need to do is, if you have assumptions that are very important, and if they are not true in your case, then your whole idea is going to go as a flop. Then you want to test them for sure. And if you know that they are easy to test, then you are waiting for what? You can go ahead and try it out. So these 4 quadrants in which we break this whole assumption map, they are given certain names, or rather I would say the assumptions that you put into these 4 quadrants, they are given certain attributes. Okay. First, there are something called test this immediately. Why? Because they are very important for you. Your hypothesis, for this hypothesis, all the assumptions that you have in this quadrant are very important for your solution, and they are easy to do. Then what are you waiting for? Test this immediately, right? The moment you are done with this, you have to move to the next quadrant, which is on the right hand side of this quadrant. Okay, what do you do there? Why are you going to catch them? Because they are also important to validate your solution. They are also very important, but at the same time they are little difficult to test. You probably need some preparation, you probably need some resources, some individuals who can conduct, some specializations required. Then you start getting ready. So while you are testing this, in parallel you start getting ready for this kind of assumptions. All the assumptions that you have in this quadrant, you get ready for those. Now these things, the one on the left hand side below, left hand side below, these are pretty easy to test, but may not be very important for you to validate. Okay, in your solution, it's okay if they are there. So then what you do is you may be testing them, but not immediately. You don't worry much about them. You don't spend much time on this. And the last quadrant is this on the right hand side below. They are difficult to test and they don't have much importance in your solution. You may have, while you are becoming the devil's advocate, you may have been a little stricter and you have found out these assumptions as well. But they are not very difficult on it. So you can just leave them out. This helps you if you do this exercise. What happens is this helps you in cutting down things that waste your time and things that are actually going to be very important. When you are at this, test this immediately, you have to spend quite a lot of time in designing the experiments in the prototype. So you can spend, rather than spending time on this kind of other assumptions, you can spend most of the time identifying what you need to do or how you need to prioritize this. Okay? Any questions till now on this? Assumption mapper?
No, I just want to ask Mr. Mukherjee, if I pick up an assumption, and how I shall know it is more important go towards the up, I see the vertical axis says the importance, and the horizontal axis says the difficulty of testing. How shall I know a particular assumption is more important or less important? It is difficult to test.
That?
On what basis? I do not have any number.
Okay. So I'll give you an example that worked for me. So there was one startup who believed that elderly people, right now we have a lot of e-grocery segments out there, no? So there is Grofers, Big Basket and all those stuff. But one startup, they believed that actually all these startups, all these Grofers and Big Baskets, they are not elderly focused. Elderly customers require a different type of segment. I mean, different type of system altogether. Now, they started off with this idea, and they thought that let's work on it. Halfway down, when we were interacting, I just asked them that, are you pretty much sure that the problem? So they jotted down a few problems that elderly people will have when they use systems like the Grofers and the Big Baskets. I said, fine. So what data do you have that says that they have this problem? Now, they were pretty silent on that. They actually didn't know. So what we understood is the whole concept that elderly people face this problem is an assumption in itself. So what did they do is, first thing, that one of the biggest thing that they assumed is elderly people, most of the time, I mean, they were targeting somebody 70 plus. So he said that 70 plus people, they cannot use an app properly. That's what that individual assumed. So he said, so let's validate this because why is it important? Because if this goes false, this is a false statement that no, elderly people are comfortable using apps, then irrespective of whether they make a brilliant app or everything is good, still elderly people is not going to come because Grofers and Big Baskets are well-known brands out there. If they are comfortable going online using these apps, then it's going to be a killer for them. So that was a high level of importance for them. Unless this is validated that elderly people are really not able to come, I mean, really not comfortable using an app, then it's a waste of effort for everybody, right? Now, another kind of assumption that they had in this, that the idea that they were working on is that the payment method that they are using, the payment method that they will be using in their app has to be cash-based. And people are not, elderly people were not comfortable using the online stuff. I mean, payments online. Now, this question, then we asked that, are you sure that they are not comfortable making online payments? They said, no, we are not sure. We have to validate. Fine. But the question is, Grofers, Big Baskets also now provide you pay while they, I mean, when the delivery boy is there, you can pay in cash. So actually, it's not something that's going to stop them from going ahead and taking up this assumption. Like, this assumption is not a make or break for them in their setup, right? So then they said, okay, fine, then we will validate that, but that's not an important thing for me yet. Important for me right now is if they're pretty much comfortable with Droppers Big Basket, what am I doing? Why am I starting thinking of that this is something they will be appreciating? So this is how you decide. Like the moment you look at an assumption that you have made, you look at that, is it something, if it is false, the assumption that I have, if it is false, is it going to stop me or break my business idea, the idea that I am having, is it going to stop it? If it is not, then you know that maybe I can try this assumption later on. But if it is saying that no, without this you can't even think of doing anything, then that's a high priority assumption. Did I answer your question?
Thank you. I understood.
Okay, great. So any other questions on this assumption mapper? Okay, I guess no. There was one point in the chat, I guess. We have English labs and we tell them that for full internal marks, we have to participate. Okay. Yes, ma'am. Yes, that's exactly. There are enough validations for this, that marks is a motivation. But what stops us from checking in case there are situations where students are like, okay, I don't care, 10 marks is nothing for me. Sometimes it does happen. So anyways, I'll move on. And now comes the most important part where
Sir, I need to ask one thing. Do we need to analyze our for phase 2 evaluation of assignment? Do we need to use this assumption mapper also as an analysis tool?
Yes. And analysis means you can use this assumption mapper and say that if you have jotted down, say, for 4 or 5 assumptions, you just put it that the first column, the top quadrant, will have this assumption. Or you don't even need to create this map. You can just write that test immediately dash assumption 1.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. So now that you have decided that the first quadrants. Yes, Swati ma'am is asking that can I give a brief of assumptions again? Ma'am, can you just unmute yourself and explain your question a bit? Which part should I be explaining again?
Yeah, so that if you can just give a brief about this validation and experiment again, so that we are able to connect to our project better, because we have understood only a bit of it. I'm sure others must have, but a little clarity more on assumptions and validation of the same.
Ma'am, let's do this then. Can you give a little bit of idea of what project you are working on? Let's try to do it a bit over.
Okay, I am working on gender diversity using design thinking.
Okay. I remember seeing your presentation. Yes. So okay, you were looking at that. Why is there gender diversity? That was your.
Yes.
I remember that.
We are making an assumption that we are still having that stereotype and we need to break it. So is that my assumption? And how do I validate that?
No, your assumption, this assumption that we are talking about, is something that is hidden in your solution. So if you are saying that you are trying to, using design thinking, you are trying to devise a process which tells you whether there is gender diversity or not, then how you are going to, what is the solution that you are devising? That is going to be, you have to identify that what things you have assumed while devising that solution.
Okay, so suppose if I'm assuming that I want to use storytelling for as a pedagogy to break that stereotype. So is that my assumption?
Okay, now I'll tell you what the assumption is. Sorry. Yes. Yeah. Okay. So you are saying that storytelling you want to use for pedagogy. Fine.
Yeah.
Now, the assumption that you may have had here is, if you use storytelling as a pedagogy, then probably, so how is storytelling as a pedagogy related to gender diversity, ma'am?
Yeah, so I'm going to create stories where I will say that, okay, till now it was the Indian mentality and the culture was
Oh.
more on the patriarchal society and more on the, so now we will having storytellings where the girl child is highlighted, where, you know, or not highlighted, where there are equal gender stories. And so that, because that has a more impact on the mindset, and that is what is registered at early stages.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you for explaining this. So I now understood. So you are sensitizing your audience using storytelling method, right?
Yes.
Okay. So what you are probably assuming is that storytelling is an effective methodology to sensitize people. Okay.
Yes. Yes.
Fine. Now, definitely, it's a huge assumption. Like, if you already have some data that says that probably previously a few things happened where storytelling has been used and that has changed people's mindset, yes, that's a validated one. You already know that it's validated. It's not an assumption. You have a reason for
Okay.
it. But if you see that no, you don't have a data which says that yes, this has been applied before, then definitely it's an assumption. And not only is an
So
assumption,
it means that I need to go and check it back in the traditional research.
yes, that's something. If you do, cool,
Okay.
you are done. In case you don't have anything in secondary research also, then you have to run some kind of prototype and experiment. Okay. So then probably you may not take this big thing like gender sensitization, probably a small mindset change, some kind of thing. I'm not sure. Probably if I can't think also even right now, but any small thing where you see that storytelling has an impact, you just want to tick mark that storytelling,
Okay.
does it have an impact, yes or no? Okay, so you can do that. Now based on how you are going to this is an important assumption, definitely. So it's definitely on towards the left hand side. Now you are checking whether it is difficult to test or easy to test. If you can come up with an way that I can actually easily test this out, then it becomes test this immediately. Okay.
Okay.
But if you
So
find that no, this is actually
as somebody has already pointed out, suppose I relate it to marks with something and then test it.
hmm.
So I will know that, okay, my assumption is validated. Could
Yeah,
be on
yeah,
any topic.
yes, 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 definitely, that will work.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, sir.
Okay.
So, Mr. Mukherjee,
Yes, yes, sir.
if I come here, one thing I want to know is my assignment related to online mode of management program.
Yes, I remember.
Then one thing I assume that this may not create much employability or placement.
Deepavan, can you just mute yourself for some time? Yeah,
Uh,
yes, yes, sir.
I assume this kind of program is not really highly employability among the students, because earlier we had a mindset that distant mode is not good. No, that is my assumption. So if when all of a sudden we change to this mode of education, then how shall I test it?
Okay, I'll come to the testing part, what you need to do. But if I understood you correctly, you are saying that you have assumed a few factors of employability and you are trying to reskill the students with that. I am going right?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so probably there are a few things. One is if you have identified the right skills, that these are the skills that has to be trained, that the students has to be trained in, that increases their employability score. That itself is an assumption that these are the skills. Whether the skills are true or not is something that you can go ahead and validate. So that's one thing. The other thing is, if you train them, they become more employable. Is another assumption. But now the question is, that's not actually an assumption. That probably is something that you are confident about, that industries are looking for certain certain skills to employ individuals. Now, if these individuals have that skill, they will naturally be taken into the industry. So that's not an assumption. That's like it's a that's a product. You are actually there is a market gap, and you are having the product fit. You are just putting it. That's fine. Where the assumption may come over here is when you deliver these trainings to the individuals, they actually are able to absorb it, and internally they enrich themselves. Whether the enrichment happens or not, they will be enriched through your program is an assumption that you have. Right?
Science. Science.
Yes,
This
sir.
is Padmanabhan. I hope I am audible.
Yes, Ivan.
Sir, let me just tell. Correct me if I am wrong. I will just explain what the nutshell what you have told as of now. That is, after the ideation phase, you will have a pool of set of solutions, that ideas that you have. Okay. Now what you do is that you just convert them into assumptions which lead to the solution for your problem, and you validate it. Once you validate it and test it, finally you will zero in on one solution. Is that the process we are moving on?
No, sir. There is one small change here. So you had a lot of ideas. From there, you did idea ranking.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Okay.
So from there, you have already chosen one idea, one single idea.
Yeah, prioritize it, and we have suppose one, two, three, maybe in the rank it may be there. You have taken one, and now you just have some assumptions. Suppose if I want to just sell something, okay, I can sell one. If I do this, I can sell. And maybe the second, if I do this, I can sell. If I do the third one, I can sell. If I do the fourth one, I can sell, and I will test it, and finally zero in on one.
Absolutely. Yes, you're right.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
You're right.
Good afternoon, Mr. Senthil.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm Dr. Shanti. So I have a question. It's a basic question that can design thinking help in cases where the research is very new? It's a example, smart manufacturing. It is industry 4.0. So this is a new area, and will design thinking help here, because you will not have any past observations, you will not have any past assumptions. So how do we go around taking the assumption? So my question has two parts. One is, how do you take assumptions for something which is very new, something which is very pioneering? And second, can design thinking help some of these new areas of research?
Absolutely. I think thanks a lot for asking this question, ma'am. Let me take the example that you asked for the industry 4.0, which, if I understand correctly, is where you have a lot of involvement of technologies in it.
Yes.
And why do we use technologies? We use technologies to make the process better. So conventional manufacturing had a lot of human involvement. Going ahead in industry 4.0, we are seeing the culmination of a lot of technologies where probably the human involvement is more, either it's cooperative or it's almost replacing.
Become minimal, and machines can interact with each other and
Exactly. So now, ma'am, where the things will really work is if I come back to design thinking, how you can design. And in fact, there are companies who have designed their manufacturing plants based on this concept. Is that, today a human being, first, the level of mechanization in an industry mostly happens in steps. And the step that goes in is, first, it was completely human-centric. I mean, human-based. Human beings were doing this. Then we had the Japanese Poka-yoke things, where there was a problem. They used to highlight that, yes, there is a problem. You tackle it. Then slowly, it's like man and machine interfere. I mean, man and machine, both of them are working. And then probably we are going at a stage where almost man is out and machine is taking over. Now, when the first Poka-yoke itself happened, if you see, human beings were making certain mistakes. And for that, first people had to observe where the mistakes happen. Yes. So it was not randomly put some kind of Poka-yokes here and there. It was very well found out, like exactly what somebody is, say probably somebody is tightening a bolt and putting a cap on it. Now, when they are putting a cap, sometimes they miss, sometimes they don't. This was a problem, for example. When it was observed, they found out that it's very difficult. You cannot go ahead and scold that individual. One thing is, people generally do, they scold that, why are you missing it? So many parts are there. But when the whole process becomes human-centric, people try to understand that why this individual is making the mistake. And when they realize that, yes, there is a mistake that the human being probably over a long period of time due to fatigue and all is happening, they realize that let's try to help him out rather than scolding him. And that's where design thinking comes, and they have started putting this Pokayokes, which actually naturally when the individual goes to the next station and try to assemble, they found out that actually I'm not able to assemble unless the cap is fitted. So now the number of mistakes comes down. So actually, before this kind of mechanization was coming out in the industry, in the manufacturing industry, there was no benchmark. Nobody knew what to be done. But the only thing that people knew is they are making a process better, which involves human being. If you look at human being and if you see that I want to make the whole process better, then you can design the whole thing around it, around the human. And that's what design thinking has been doing before also. Going ahead also, you will be finding areas of improvement where to improve, just looking at the right now, the human being who is involved there.
Okay. Yeah.
Does this make sense now?
Yes, yes, thank you.
Okay. So, any other questions you have? Okay. So, yes.
Can you, this 1 minute, can you explain this assumption map?
Are you asking about the assumption map once more?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay,
Yes.
okay. No worries, sir. No worries. So, see, assumption mapper, first of all, let me close this, then it will be easy. So, assumption mapper actually has two things. So, it's an X and the Y axis. On the Y axis, what you have is how important the assumption that you have in your. So, first of all, if you remember, we chose one idea after our idea shopping cart. We chose the idea that we want to work upon, not the maximum score one. If you remember, we have always mentioned this, that we are not looking at the total and saying that this is the maximum score. There was a process we decided that this idea we will go forward with. Now, when we are having that idea, we are looking at it and we have a devil's advocate who is criticizing it and saying that, you know what, you have not checked this in this idea, whether you are assuming a lot of things in your idea. You note down all those assumptions. Okay. Once you have all the assumptions noted down, then you look at this assumption mapper. And what it says, the y-axis says that how important is this assumption for your solution. If the assumption is actually going to, if the assumption goes false, so probably something you believe is true, which is normally a human bias. You believe that this is true. But then what happens is the moment it becomes false, you are out of the business. The example that I was giving, the startup who thought that elderly people will be interested in different kind of a grocery, e-grocery system, they assumed that elderly people are not comfortable with Grofers or big baskets. Now that was a make or break kind of thing. If they found it later on at a later stage, like say for example, they have made everything, they have invested, they got funding, and they are out in the market, and they realize that they are actually competing with Grofers and big basket because elderly people aren't buying stuff from Grofers and big basket, then it's a waste. The whole effort goes for a waste. So it's a very high important assumption to be proved. Now that becomes your y-axis. On the z-axis, it says that how easily can you test this assumption. If you can test this assumption pretty easily, then it becomes it comes towards the left hand side. If it is very difficult to test, then it goes towards the right hand side. So what becomes the left hand top quadrant, it says that these are the assumptions that you need to test immediately. Go ahead and test all the assumptions immediately because they are very important for you to validate and also very easy to test. You don't have to spend much time, much resources or anything. Next says, the one on the right hand side top says that these are also very important. All these assumptions are very important for you to test, but it's a little difficult to test. So you prepare yourself to test these assumptions. Now you come to the lower end, which is the left hand side lower end. Whatever you have, it says that these are not very important assumptions to make. So for the example that I give again on this elderly people's e-grocery segment, the founders were believing that people are not comfortable with online payment, which was not even important to validate at the beginning. It was okay if they are comfortable, not comfortable, we'll see. It's not important right now. So that comes under the quadrant which says that these can wait. These are easy to test, but can wait. You don't need to do this immediately. And there are certain assumptions that we make just because we want to criticize and make sure that everything is fine in our idea. Sometimes it does happen. So those assumptions are difficult to test and are also not very important. Then you can leave them out. You say that I don't want to waste any of my resources. Time. Okay. Is this clear now?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you very much for doing it again.
No problem, sir. Yeah. Fine. So I'll move ahead. Now we are moving to a state where we are going to designing experiments. Okay. So mostly you have done your job. 80% of the job is done. You have very well identified a problem, sharpened it to become a how might be question. From there, you went to a lot of ideas, chosen the best idea, got all the assumptions, and identified which assumption to test. Now when you know that this is the assumption that I need to test, definitely you have to design an experiment around it. So there are 4 major steps, major things that you should be concerned about when you are designing an experiment. The first and foremost is, yes.
Yeah, Mr. Sayantan, sorry to disturb.
No, sir. Tell me.
Yeah, I just wanted to, small thing I want to know is this difficulty of testing. So what all the aspects will come, get covered in that? I mean, is it, we are talking about the length of time also it will take, or is that the technology wise it is difficult to test? What are all aspects will go into that?
Thank you for the question, sir. This is also a very important aspect. Yes. This again is very much relative to the team who is working. Okay. Something which I will probably put easy to test, maybe for your team it will be difficult to test, and vice versa. So how it works is, yes, you can say that sometimes time is a constraint for you. So then you say that I will put time as difficulty in testing. Sometimes time may not be a constraint, but technicality, like you don't probably have all the resources to run those immediately. Then that becomes difficult in testing. So the parameters that you put under difficulty in testing is something that you as a team has to decide and take care. This is a methodology that you will be following, but things that goes into it, again, also importance wise also, it's something that you can decide that how you put on the parameters of importance. Similarly, here also you can do the same thing. Right?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so coming back to the experiment design. Okay, so you have the prototype, you have the assumption decided. So you even in your assignment also we are asking about one assumption, and generally it's better that you in your own project also you take one assumption at a time, complete this, and then you can come back to another. So first thing that you do when you are designing the experiment is define that for whom I am defining this experiment. It is important that why this is important, because for different people this varies. Now I'll give you an example how it is, and I'll tell you a story also around it. But mostly when the example that I showed you, that rotavator, which was an agricultural implement, we had multiple stakeholders there to validate. Okay, definitely the final users were few people, but also because this was a design thinking experiment, we always start first and then ask for funding from the management. So management also is one stakeholder. Now, when you are designing an experiment, so one of the assumptions that we had is when we show management our prototype that this is how it will look like, they will be pretty happy and give us money to go ahead. But that's a big assumption. So we had to definitely formulate an experiment. And we thought that the experiment that we will be doing, I'll show you the prototype and all what we made. but definitely it was very much customized for the management, what management wants to see in it, how they decide whether they are going to fund it or not. All those aspects we kept in that prototype. But if we were designing something for the end user who is a farmer, definitely the prototype would have been quite different. The experiment performed also would have been quite different. Okay, so when you are designing your experiment, the first thing that you decide is, for whom am I trying this out? Am I doing it for my management? Am I doing it for the end user or somebody else? Fine. Then the next step that you do is, how easily can you communicate what's there in your mind through the prototype and the experiment to the one you are showing it. So you have to understand this individual, whomever you are running the experiment with, very well. If you know that individual or a group of people well, then you can design your experiment quite well. Okay, that. Sorry, I think I lost the connection. Yeah, I had I'll stop presenting. I lost connection a bit in between. 1 minute. Let me.
Now, okay, sir.
Yeah, it's now back. I'm back now. So our virtual infrastructure interfered in our flow. Yeah. Okay. The third point is, what are the various points to know during the experiment? What does that mean? That means that I have made the experiment, I have made the prototype, that's there with the user is using it. What they are doing, what are the different aspects am I going to note while they are using it or while they are fiddling with it? This is also important for you to note, because if you are ready with everything and you don't know exactly what to look for, then end of the experiment you don't know what did you get. Did you get anything, or you didn't get? Then you're like, oh my god, I don't know, I have not I didn't know what to check. So it's important that you know that I will be checking this aspects while I do the experiment. And number 4 is, what are the go no go parameters? So I'll give you an example of this. The same e-groceries stuff. So the way they designed the whole thing was, they put some kind of a paper ad and all those stuff in a paper, not a paper ad actually. They created a brochure, okay, in a small pamphlet, where they spoke about that only elderly focused e-grocery or something. If you are interested in this, call this number. They put this big fonts. The reason they put this big fonts was the second point over here in design and the second pointer that you can see. How easily can you communicate? So you know very well that elderly people, they may be having some eye problems and all. So you have to have the font sizes big. So they had all those stuff in their pamphlet. What they did is, they went to the local newspaper guy and said that, put this pamphlet in the newspaper and put it to those people who are actually those apartments where there are elderly people. So they actually tried this out. And when they tried this out, it actually they were supposed to get some results out of it. Now, the no-go parameter for them was, if they are getting, say, they have put, say, approximately 80 such kind of pamphlets out. If they are getting at least 30 or 40 call back, then they know that this is a good idea to go ahead with. So their assumption is validated, that people are ready to go into a different kind of a platform. So that was their go no go parameter. Similarly for you, you also have to define the go no go parameter for your stuff. Okay. Now these are generally the 4 different points that you do. Now, based on the experiment that you have decided to conduct, you have to design your prototype. The example that I just now gave you, the experiment was these people. There is a question over here. Let me take that first. When you are designing an experiment to validate the assumption, how should we define the Sample size. Okay. Again, this is very relative in terms of, say, these people who I am talking about, they were doing in a pretty small area. So in around this, they were approximately, say, in an apartment, they first tried doing it. And in that apartment, approximately there were 180 houses. They decided that in this, all this 180 houses will put, and if we get a 40 approximately calls from there, we will say that this is fine, we will go ahead with it. Ideally, the bigger the sample size, the better, obviously in everywhere, but obviously you cannot get everyone into the foray. The other example that I have is the one that I did in Mahindra with this rotavator, because that was focused on farmers in the southern part of India. What we did is we took 3 different districts of Tamil Nadu, and there we ran with approximately 15 different farmers. So in total 45 farmers we tried out before we decided that this comes out good. Now, were we confident that this 45 represents the whole population? No, we weren't. But most of the time it happens that whatever, I mean, generally that was a take that yes, generally if you are covering, say if you have 10 different districts to cover, you are doing at least 3, and diverse type of farmers, we use diverse type of farmers. That gave us the confidence. It was more of our confidence to decide this sample size and this sample type. Yeah. Okay. Thanks, ma'am. Okay, so I move on to, yeah. So obviously now I was explaining the difference between this experiment and the prototype. So the experiment that these guys ran was that they created this pamphlet. They went ahead and talked to the newspaper guy. The newspaper guy put it inside the house of these people. These people actually looked at it and they decided if they want to call or not. They decided on basis that all these things are the complete experiment. But what was the prototype? The prototype was they designed the designing of this pamphlet. The pamphlet itself was a prototype. Then when the pamphlet goes into the house, there was a number that was there. So people were calling this number. So that number on the other end was also a part of the prototype. So the different things that you make, design, in order to run an experiment is prototype. So the experiment is, you can say that prototype is a subset of the experiment. Okay, so sometimes people confuse between what is an experiment and what is a prototype. So that's why experiment and prototypes are not synonymous. Most of the time people make the mistake thinking that when you say prototyping, generally we consider experiment also within it. That's why we say prototyping. But most of the time what happens is, if you look at the 5-stage model, post prototype you say test. So that's the experiment, right? So this is how it is. Now what I will do is, now I mean we have a few time left. Yeah, any question?
Sir, screen is not visible.
My screen is not visible? Oh,
Yes, sir.
okay, I didn't know
It's
that.
visible, sir. It's visible. It's visible.
Oh, well, I think so. You try once more. I think it's visible then. Okay, what I wanted to show is, now that we actually completed the 5 stages, what I wanted to show you is, I have been talking in glimpses of this project that I actually worked on, this rotavator stuff. I thought I'll show you, it's better to show you the whole journey, and with whom I tried this. It definitely gives you a lot of confidence when you see people who have actually tried this part, worked this part, and they getting success. So this was obviously, I'm not going through the same thing. Yes, this is the project that was given to me. I was working alone at that time. I was told that we have to increase the business of rotavator in South India, mainly in Tamil Nadu. There is a lot of potential. We have to identify where the problem lies and can we do something about it. So just one, yeah. So now I was having a resource crunch because I had nobody with me to work with. And then luckily, I got a bunch of people. And you see this picture, these all were people with whom I worked on this, very young people, new joinees. So the concept that yesterday we were talking about, that do we need to be an expert? You don't have to be an expert from the very beginning. Yes, you can always get help of experts throughout your journey. That always works. But at least you need to have the passion that this is something I want to solve, and you know exactly where to learn and what to learn. So, so there is a question. Could you explain this with the help of an abstract example too, like track? Yes. I will do that. Ma'am, once I'm done explaining this part, if you can ask your question, I'll just find out that how I can explain you the whole process, and definitely can be done. Okay. The reason why I picked this example to show you is that this is a whole journey done by these very young people and the success that they got. So that's why I am picking this up. So this is where the first step of design thinking happens, where what we did is, even before empathy, this, if you remember, at the very first day, Mr. Ravikant was talking about a part where you are deciding that where are you actually going to go, what you already know about them or what you want to know about them. What you are essentially doing is you're creating an aim for you before you go even into the empathy. And this is a very important part. Not many people talk about it, but thanks to Mr. Ravikant, he pointed that thing out. And this is something that we did at the very beginning. We first decided where we are going, who are they, what we know about. And this is important because, you know, most of the time we have a lot of assumptions, and here only, at this stage only, a lot of bias. So you can see people were writing. So I just told them that, okay, we are going to go to this place of Tamil Nadu, and there is going to be some farmers. So what do you think they will be like? What are the different aspects you can think of when I say a farmer from this area? So people were coming and people were writing down what they have. And you know what? A lot of things were about how poor the farmers are, how they struggle and all those stuff. But something that we realized later on when we went is not all farmers are actually poor. In fact, the place that where we went, we had farmers who were pretty doing good. Not only they are doing good, they are helping others to do good as well. Completely a different shift in what assumptions we had to what we found out in the real world. So this was the first step that they did. Then this is where is what is called as real empathy, where these people went out in the field, and it was hot. It was May, and May in Chennai and around is very, very hot. But they actually needed to feel exactly how it feels like. So we had to be there at that heat. You can see people were trying to on the left hand side, the picture that you see. They were trying to fix something. This thing is called the cage wheel. The one that you are seeing in the iron wheel, that's a cage wheel. That's another thing that you generally attach to the tractor wheel. So they were trying to put that, how they put it and everything. You have to watch all these things, because if you watch this, then only you know where to improve and what to improve, right? So the engineers, they were involved in talking to them. You can see on the right hand side picture, this guy is holding a recorder in front of him. He was recording all the stuff, obviously with due permission of the person. So there was a lot of data that was collected, and then there is a lot of fun, a lot of fun about how you gather the information. There are many techniques that you apply. There are many empathy techniques that you apply to get the best out of your end user. In our case, this was the farmer. So I'm not going into details of this, but this is something that our farmer drew. And it's a very interesting story, in fact. So what we were trying to, this process that we applied is called Draw Your Day. Okay, this is an empathy process where you help your user draw his day, one day of his life, and you identify the gaps from there. So here he drew this. He assumed that this is him. I don't know whether you can see my cursor. I guess you can. This is him. On the tractor. This is what his tractor looks like, he says. and at the back is the thing which is this agricultural implement called rotavator. So he says 7 a.m. I climb up the stairs to my tractor and I am sitting. 9 a.m. he shows that he has come down, but 9:30 a.m. he shows that he is having breakfast, and so on. It goes so on, and then we ask that, okay, 9 a.m. you got down. Why are you having breakfast at 9:30 a.m.? What were you doing 9 to 9:30 a.m.? So he said something very interesting. He said that I come down to clean, and we were like, what are you cleaning? He said that, you know what, this field is full of mud, right? So my rotavator actually, it gets the mud gets into it and it gets jammed. So I have to clean them. Now this was something that they never have spoken to anybody before. No competitor has ever known this fact before. So for us also it was pretty new, and what happens is the farmers believe that this is a very natural phenomenon. It's supposed to happen. So there is nothing to complain about. So neither they talk when somebody goes as a market research that, do you face any problem in your system? They don't talk about it. They say, no, this is pretty good. So the moment when we showed this to them, I mean, we asked this question, and we were like, oh my goodness, nobody ever knew that this is a problem. Then we started working on this, and you can see all these engineers, young engineers, they came back. They do a lot of defining exactly what the problem statements are. You can see a lot of sticky notes getting used, because these are things that we called inciting and insight bucketing. So they collected all those insights. They identified that first, I guess second day I was talking about how you quantify insights. So this is where they are actually quantifying insights. There is another similar image where they were coming up with ideas. So all these things happened. There were mainly two problems that we identified. One was this, which was the mud getting stuck. The other problem was there was a lot of complaint from the farmer's end that he spends a lot of time in the field, where actually he could have gone into other businesses. So because he was a well-to-do farmer, he said that I don't want to spend my time in the field. I want to do a lot of other things. If somebody else can take care of my field, I would have been happy. But unfortunately, there is a huge labor shortage. So I am not able to give it to anybody else. Now, these two different things were taken up, and the whole team started working on it. And for the second problem that I mentioned, where the farmer wanted something to do the job on its own, people came up with something like an autonomous puddling machine. How it can be an autonomous? It doesn't require a tractor itself to pull. So this was one of the first things. So this is the first stage of prototyping where they actually started drawing. You draw different views of the product. So they did that, and then this product came up, which was again a very small lean model. But this lean small model was designed for the management. I was telling you that we decided to come up with a prototype which is good enough to convince the management that the progress of the project is good, and we need more funding to take the project out in the market. There is a video. I'm not playing the video here. I'm straight away going to the other solution that we came up with, which was for the one which is the mud getting stuck into the rotavator, and that's, you had been hearing about this single blade configuration, and this is the one that you can see in front of you, the single blade configuration with a hinge over here, and there is a different blade, both in one single blade. That this came up. This was designed over a lot of virtual validation done, and finally this blade actually got the design registration. It's end of the day, what we do, whatever we do, we end of the day want a result, and we feel like happy when we get a good result. So I wanted to motivate you all showing this part of it, where we actually got, in fact, this I received post I left Mahindra. And this guy, obviously the first name that you see over there, Sri Balaji Narayan, he is the guy. He was a new joinee, and within a couple of years of his being into the system, he got this design registration. It's probably a memorable thing for him. He can never forget. These are the two inventors that you see over here, Sri Balaji Narayan with on my side here, and here this girl you can see, Paroma Sen. She is the one who came up with this concept of this autonomous puddler, and these are the guys who helped her develop this. So I thought that I wanted to motivate you a bit, that they joined fresh, absolutely fresh, with no background in anything, from there to here, if they can move, there is no reason none of us can't. So I stop here, but obviously there was one question that Aisha ma'am asked, that if there can be some other example. Aisha ma'am, I'm not sure whether I mean, actually, I don't have any idea in mind right now. If you can just touch upon that, some example, I'll take forward with it, and I can explain the whole stuff.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon. Yeah.
Someone else had asked, another ma'am had asked, she was trying to apply this design thinking process to an experiment in gender equality, right?
Okay.
So do you have any such examples? For example, experiment, whatever I was trying to do was based on making research, getting a PhD more accessible, because right now the way the process is, it's really unless and until you have the resources in the background, it's really hard for everyone. So anything that would make that process. So that is what I was trying to apply. All of this that you've been telling us for the past few days to that. So that is why I was asking for an abstract.
No problem, ma'am. I understood your question. So first, let me tell you where you will get a lot of benefit. Which part of this whole process you will get the most benefit is in the function modeling. Okay. First, you understood that there is you are doing research, trying to get a PhD, and there are certain difficulties in it, right? So what do? Is you want to make the whole process of completion of PhD simpler, right? Am I right? Is that your question? Okay. Yeah. So now, when you know that, then you start identifying. You break the system into subsystems and supersystem components, and find out who are the different players in this whole thing, who does what. So here you have to bring out a lot of emotional aspects also. I think I probably have seen your assignment as well, and I remember you also might have taken up a few mindset aspects into this component. Then what you do is,
I have submitted the phase 1 where I have just drawn the interaction map, which subsystem or system that impacts each other. But then I got really I didn't have anyone to consult and all that, so I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. So
no worries, ma'am. I would suggest that even if you could not complete it right now, it's okay. Take this forward and use it at your work. Gather a couple of team members, and together you look at it. Now, what you need to do is you spend quite a good time in the function model. Okay, identify where the thing goes wrong. Okay, which interaction? Most of the time, if I am not wrong, there is this the one who is doing the PhD and with whom I mean the guide. This is where the most of the time the problem happens. Maybe I am not sure. Cannot comment much.
Can I interrupt, please? Yeah. So for example, people, they've given the exam and now they're waiting for the university to, for the next process, where they before the coursework and all that, and that isn't happening. I know people here in my department who've been waiting for that for 2 years, but that is something we can't change, right? Something I cannot even change the government. But I was thinking of making the entire process of researching, for example, that the research methodology part, we don't. When I did my MA, it was a very simple one. There was no one to teach us that. So, if we could change that, get developing that kind of thing right from, when children are probably in 11th or 12th, and getting them to think in that manner. So at least that was one hurdle that they could solve. That kind of thinking. Right now, the way it is done in school is they just, it's just memorizing and stuff. There's no the research part, they magically expect you to learn when you get into the postgraduate studies, but it's not that easy, right? It's not something that you can just snap your fingers and just learn at that moment. So that is something I wish to change. I know I cannot change the red tape part of it and all that. I cannot change, but this part of it. And and one more thing, for example, the research that is especially in humanities, right? It's not I don't think, I doubt there are so many, for example, somebody's thesis, I would want to pick it up and read it, right? So stuff that is actually interesting and which, if I want to do a PhD, I don't want to do something that will just get me that PhD. and then I can just shove it somewhere. I wanted to actually make some difference. Stuff like
Yeah.
that. I don't know. I've like taken up a really weird problem.
No, still it works. Actually, ma'am, this whole process that we have been going through since, I think the second day, whatever I have told you, na, doesn't matter how complex your problem seems. The whole process, if you follow, you will find that it will be a sudden discovery of realization that you will realize that, oh my goodness, I thought that whole thing is so complex. It doesn't seem so anymore, because you break it into so many small parts, and by the time you reach the end, which is how might we, you will find that you probably thought that it's something else, and the how might we brought you to something very simple. And the moment you solve that how might we, probably that big thing which was overwhelming you, that's gone. So I would suggest, ma'am, whatever, you are the expert in your domain, so you have already identified an area where it requires improvement. So focus on that part, apply function model, apply the multi-why analysis, the deep dive, and I am pretty sure you will be getting something quality enough. But you have to probably spend little more time than any other, like engineering products are pretty simple. They don't actually vary like human mind, but this does. So you need to probably work on that.
Hello.
Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good
Hello.
afternoon.
Good afternoon. So, myself, Dr. Nirmal Sharma, and my problem area is already I have submitted my first assignment, that is how to inculcate values among technical students. So actually, if it's a second phase of this assignment, I'm not able to do, because I think it's not required. Yeah, we cannot have any working model about this problem. We can have only the analysis, we can have some tested role play, these might be the diverse thinking, yeah, role play, yeah, we can provide them more role model, yeah, they can have some, we can say real life of situation, yeah, the teaching would be for those students, so that they can learn and they can just have that thing. So we have this, what is the thing as far as the assumption is concerned and this evaluation process is concerned. So for that thing, what I need to write, how to solve this phase 2 assignment as far as this topic is concerned. This is my submission of it.
Okay.
I have a suggestion.
Yeah.
We are getting into the last session of the day's mode. So since we are already, we have crossed the time for this session, we will pause here, and then we will take up these questions in the last session when the presentations are there. There is some time provided for these things to be answered. I think we just hold on, ma'am. We will get back to them.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir. Okay,
right.
Thank you.
Thank you. And that's very nice and inspiring presentation by Mr. Sayantan Mukherjee. You know, at least it should inspire some of us to do some things which will make us proud by getting a valuable intellectual property in our name. So what we will do is we'll break for about 5 minutes. It's about 3:50 now. Up to 3:55 we break, and 3:55 we'll come back. You don't have to log out. We continue like this. And 3:55 the next session we start, because 5 o'clock again the Art of Living session will start. We will respect the time by then. Yeah.
Sir, I have something to say. Shantan sir.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Sir, my problem is I tried to make the course that you have assigned to us. So I was not paired up with anyone, but I tried to, do that assignment as you made us understand. So can you please check it and, give us, feedback so that I can make myself ready for other tasks also?
Sure. We'll do it.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Done. Okay. Thank you. 5 minutes break and we are back.